native of Asheville and the great-granddaughter of Joe Anderson, who was enslaved during Zebulon Vance's tenure as Colonel of the Confederate Army NC 26th Regiment and Governor of the state of North Carolina during the Civil War. The Vance Monument was built in 1898 directly in front of the courthouse, a symbol of power, where a few years before, enslaved people had been sold on its steps. When I was young, it was where the segregated bathroom and water fountain stood. Like every other African American who grew up in the era of Jim Crow law, I suffered the indignities of America's racism. Over the years that followed, I have worked to bring people together rather than set them apart. But Vance was a slave owner, opposed rights for blacks, and firmly believed that blacks' place was in servitude. Vance believed that the pure stream of African barbarism ran through the veins of blacks. In a letter shortly after the Civil War, he wrote, "There are indications that the radicals intend to force perfect Negro equality upon us. Should this be done, there is nothing that I can do to prevent it. It would revise an already half-formed determination in me to leave the United States forever." Over the years, multiple residents and some city council members have called for the removal of this monument as a symbol of white supremacy. This includes the establishment of a task force to address the Vance Monument. Serving as co-chair, I wanted to help the task force find a common purpose in reimagining the symbolic structure. The near unanimous vote for removal was to allow a new message that is positive, aspirational, and inclusive of all people. The city council and county commissioners voted to accept the recommendations of the task force. Later ruling of the Superior Court and the Appeals Court upheld the near unanimous vote. This monument no longer has a place in our mountain home. We have moved on to the future, which is a place that brings people together rather than set them apart. If the monument was left in its original form, rather than completely removed, it would continue to serve as a symbol of white supremacy to those most affected by its presence. This space can now strengthen relationships and build community and help us to heal our community.
Deborah Miles, and the co-chair with Ms. Simmons of the Monument Task Force. Thank all the folks that helped bring this to this day. We're here today because an intergenerational group of African Americans, young and older, organized following the murder of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Ahmaud Arbery. They shared their stories and their vision of how the city and the county might right the wrongs of the past. And the removal of the Confederate monument is part of that list. And I'm grateful to all that have worked for its removal, including the Vance Monument Task Force and our elected officials. With this historic decision, we join other North Carolina communities who have removed their Confederate monuments, including Raleigh, Durham, and Winston-Salem, in saying this was a story of the past. Now we have new stories for the youth of our mountain home of how to live in a pluralistic democracy. Stories that give access to a larger sense of belonging for a far wider community. I wrestle with this story too because it's personal to me. My fourth great-grandfather, John Daniel Miles, was a member of the North Carolina Caswell County Boys, and at the age of 54, on the second day of fighting, he died at the Battle of Gettysburg. Many of the people here today, all across this town and all across our western North Carolina mountains, have ancestors that have their own intersection with our past. This is part of how we reckon with that past, so that we might move forward into the future with stories that teach us about collaboration, respect of differences and similarities, and move us beyond tribalism. This is how we tell the stories that match our mountains for the people of the 21st century and into the 22nd century. Thank you. Mayor Manheimer. I'll just step on you.
Oh,
Oh, grab the pack. There we go. We'll put that on here. Thank you,
I'll
Nick.
just hold it. I just want to say that today we're celebrating a victory, a unanimous decision from the North Carolina Supreme Court on the issue of the city and county's effort to remove the Vance Monument. The defense of the city was led by Brad Branham, our city attorney, and his legal team that did an excellent job. And I also want to thank our task force, Ms. Simmons and Ms. Miles, and as well as the rest of the task force that was appointed by the city and the county in making the decision to have the Vance Monument removed, which the city honored and removed it. And we've been in a bit of a holding pattern. As you can see, there's still some pieces left, and the reason they've remained is we've been waiting for this court decision. The city has now received a $3 million Mellon grant to put in place a new vision for the city center right here in Pack Square, and we look forward to an opportunity to capture the feeling of all of Asheville and Buncombe County as we reimagine our center of our city and what that looks like and what that feels like.
Quick question for you guys. I guess it's for either one, or well, actually any of you guys. In terms of what happens next, does that U.S. Supreme Court, or is this final
Talking to that.
decision? It ends here.
It is always somewhat difficult to say never when you're dealing in the world of potential legal claims, but this is as far as we can go in the state of North Carolina. The Supreme Court is our ultimate authority. We felt like the opinion was definitive, and it's our belief that this brings to a close this long legal chapter.
I guess the bigger question is, can this civil group, the civil court, do they have the ability legally to take this to the next level if they wanted to? Again, I don't know that they would, but do they have that ability?
I place no limits on the creativity of someone, especially with an attorney. However, I think it would be somewhat difficult. You're talking about two parties, both from the same state. I don't believe there are constitutional issues at play in this. There never have been. We think that outside of the state's jurisdiction, there really is nothing more to litigate.
So in terms of removing these last few things and getting started on this $3 million grant, y'all are going to get going no matter. You're not waiting to see if they move on to the U.S. Supreme Court. You're going forward. That's it, right? Just want to make sure, or that you're not just standing by to see just in case they take that next level.
Yeah, I think this is fairly still fresh, but we plan on moving forward as city staff and exploring the next steps of reinitiating the removal project. So we don't plan on waiting to get that process started. That obviously doesn't happen immediately, so that will necessarily take a few days.
Okay, but yeah, and again, last thing is I know it's right before here. In terms of getting this last bit down, what are we looking at specifically timeline-wise? At least for removing this base here, a couple of weeks total.
You're talking well outside of my area of legal expertise, but I'll have to defer to experts on that in a different field.
But it's fair to say short term, very short term.
I would say that it's fair to say we hope that the start of it is short term, and until we get in and really see what the logistics look like, it's hard to say exactly how long that will take. Let me grab this while I can
Come on, no then.
storm. Make this a little
Like I
easier.
can keep going, but I'm not going to freak you guys out.
All right. Oops. Would you mind repeating that one more time?
Yeah, the breach of contract element. I think that was one of the parts that the Supreme Court, decided in the favor of the city, was that there was no breach of contract on behalf of that organization.
Yeah, so the original claim that was filed against the city was one based in contract. The city never disputed the fact that this particular group that filed the lawsuit donated some funds and some time to help with the renovation. Their claim was essentially that donation and the agreement that went along with it gave them the right to enforce the continued existence of the Vance Monument. We never agreed with that. No court has agreed with that, and the Supreme Court's opinion made it pretty clear that there simply was no claim based in contract.
You
One
may.
more thing logistically, did you guys have to return? I think it was like $15,000 or something to for that group that was given to the city to maintain it. Did you have to return that money?
No money has been returned.
And it's not expected to be.
No, we have no plans on returning any funds. All those funds went toward the restoration, but at that point, all the terms of the agreement between this party and the city were fulfilled.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
You guys get that.
Berlin, I'd be interested to ask you guys a couple questions.
Sure.
Sorry. Why was it important to take it all the way? To this fight. And just your speech mentioned, your personal battles, both of you
Yes.
in this. And I'd love to hear more about, your perspective and why that was important in this context. Maybe what that means in the terms of both the city, but also, personal efforts in this. Because I don't know if you want to answer that.
Well, one of the things was I wanted to help to bring about a change, to right some of the wrongs, and what a better way than volunteering to serve on the task force that was appointed by city council and county commissioners, and then to become co-chair with Miss Miles, and for all of the work that we put in it. Then we were ready to go to the final end of it. So therefore we persevered. We went to court in Raleigh. And we have been waiting on this day, and this day is finally here, and I can say, let the healing begin.
I would say too, when council made the decision to honor the task force recommendation and remove the monument, we knew we were going to get sued. I mean, we made an educated decision about that. So we were prepared to be sued, and then if we were sued, we would go all the way to the Supreme Court, because that was how this was going to work. And we'd seen, another city, Winston-Salem, ahead of us, had to do the same battle. So we had a pretty good idea of what was going to happen. Now, we did see a change in the Supreme Court, North Carolina, after the election. So we had a lot of concerns, but we are very vindicated today with the unanimous decision from that court, and obviously worth the effort.
That's right. I would like to say that prior to the last few years, there were at least 3 Confederate monuments here within view of the courthouse. There were 2 here, this one here, and a 4th one actually by the courthouse. And these were all put up in relationship to the courthouse when it was here, because those are symbols of power. And they told a story that centered white supremacy as in front of the courthouse, in front of the banks and the houses of worship that are all very close to right here. And that was how the institutions maintained a caste system. And part of moving into the future, part of our our struggles to be a better people in a pluralistic democracy is get to a spot where we really, people do have opportunities far beyond what they can imagine for themselves, and telling new stories. I think monument is a Latin word that means remember and warn, and we need different stories that give hope and future and belief in themselves and their generations for our young people, and that's why we did this.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
All right.
Thank y'all for braving.